Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, April 7th, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is back with us. Welcome back, Larry.
You still consider me a friend, huh? After all the abuse I put you through. All right. You're a generous soul, Neva.
Larry, Netanyahu right now is in the United States. He wants to meet with Donald Trump. In your opinion, what does he want from Donald Trump this time?
Well, I suspect one of the issues on the table is what is the United States going to follow through and attack Iran? Um, it's definitely the coordination on that front. Um, the issue of Yemen is likely to come up. You know, Netanyahu will press him. You know, um, it's sad that Trump is a captive, a hostage of the Zionists. But in the ideal world, we'd like to think that Trump's going to call Netanyahu in and read him the riot act and say, "Hey, you got to stop killing all these Palestinians and murdering journalists." He's not going to do that. So this is more about, oh yeah, Israel's our best friend, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that they can kill more Palestinians. Unfortunately, I think this is, Netanyahu faces some significant political and legal challenges at home, and maybe he's looking for some guarantees from Trump that Trump will be there to, have his back. But when you take all that together, I think really the critical issue, though, that to be discussed is Iran, because I fully anticipate that Trump's going to follow through on his threat. I hope I'm wrong. I hope people are going to come back and say, "Johnson, man, you are so wrong." And I'll say, "Thank God. Thank God."
It seems that the Shin Bet chief, he said that the Prime Minister Netanyahu, the way that he's treating him, that he dealing with him, because of he wanted him to interfere in the corruption trial he has in Israel.
Right.
And do you think that this is the only reason for that, or he's just not? He's not from the same sort of ilk that Netanyahu is.
Well, when you say the same sort of ilk, you mean a diehard Zionist or what?
No, those who are who believe that the only way to get out to deal with Gazans would be attack them and destroy them.
Yeah, yeah. Um, no, I think it's actually the corruption angle, because Shin Bet, they operated a little bit more like the FBI does in the United States. They are let's call it the national police in Brazil. Uh, they've carried out the investigations, collected the evidence of both Netanyahu and his cronies, and I think Netanyahu wants to get somebody in charge of Shin Bet that's going to do his bidding, not going to investigate him. I think, Netanyahu, from my point of view, is he's a criminal, and on top of overseeing the murder of Palestinians on a daily basis, they finally conceded just the other day that they had in fact massacred these 15 aid workers. They try, we thought they were Hamas and they were posing a threat, and none of that was true. They killed them because they were Palestinian. This is, reminiscent of the era in which the KKK would round up people just because they were black, and kill them. So yeah, it is. It's a form. It's genocide in its pure form, and Netanyahu's presiding over it.
It seems that the Israeli media is talking about, as we know, that the situation between Iran and the United States is getting worse, but the Israeli media, by the way, was pointing out that the Arab states, the behavior of these states is of concern from the point of view of Israeli officials. It seems that they're seeing that Arab, on one hand, say to the United States, we're going to support you, we're with you. And on the other hand, sending messages to the Iranian leadership that they're not going to use our land to attack you. How do you see, is that of concern on the part of the United States, the way that the Arab states are behaving? And on one side they're talking with Iranians, on the other hand they're talking with the United States and Israel.
Well, the era in which the United States had, let's call it, complete dominance over the Middle East. Let's go back to the Suez crisis in, what was that, 53, 54? And then President Eisenhower could order the British, the French, and the Israelis, stop your military action, get the hell out of Egypt. And they had to comply. The United States was strong enough to enforce that. And the other Arab states wouldn't challenge us. That started to change. And it's I guess exposing the weakness of the United States now, particularly in light of what's going on in Yemen. There were the news media reports were coming out yesterday that the Trump administration is growing increasingly frustrated. I mean, good God, we keep bombing those Yemenis and they keep firing missiles. The Trump folks naively believed that all they had to do was flex a little bit of naval muscle and the Yemenis would fall into a fetal position and not represent a threat. And they didn't pay attention to what happened under Biden, and now they're going, oh my God, this is costing us it's cost us $1 billion this month since March 15th, $1 billion in less than a month. So what they're discovering is the missiles that the Yemenis fire, the cruise missiles, the ballistic missiles, and the drones, they fire from mobile launchers. That means they're not in one fixed place. They're moving around. And the United States doesn't have multiple reliable intelligence platforms that can detect something in real time, and then just like a flip of the switch can immediately launch a missile strike. There's always time. There's a passage of time. The one weapon system that is out there, an intelligence collection platform, the MQ-9 Reaper drone, it can actually fly. It can be armed. It can fly over a site. It can say, oh, we see this activity going on, and then it can be used to fire a weapon. The problem is the Houthis have become pretty good at shooting them down. They've reportedly shot down their 17th one just last week. And when you add the price of those up, those go for $30 million a pop. So you got over $510 million worth of drones that have been shot down by the Houthis. $500 million. That's, I could live off of that. I don't know about you, but
everybody.
yeah. So, okay. So that show of strength by Yemen, I think, is starting to have an effect on some of the other Arab nations. They're saying, you know what? Look at the United States is quite as strong and powerful as we believed. So this is it's a region that's in real uncertainty. And then you've got on top of that now the threats that Trump is making about attacking Iran. And Iran, from what I've seen, is taking that threat seriously. They're stepping up preparations to be able to fight.
They're totally prepared, Larry.
Yeah,
you follow the Iranian media, you perceive that they're totally prepared for everything, for the worst. Larry, do you think that Donald Trump would put troops on the ground in Yemen because their operation is not going well there?
If Trump did that, it would be a disaster. The buildup that would be required. One, what are you going to deploy? If they're going to put in a special operations team, a group of Green Berets, maybe they'll be there'd be no way to sustain them. So you're talking a full up invasion, and where are they going to stage that invasion from? Egypt? I don't see the Egyptians signing on board to that. Israel? It's just, the logistics involved in this would be so significant that because Yemen's a tough mountainous terrain. It's not like they're going to go attack just one location. Yeah, you can conduct a raid on one location and maybe get away with it, but this would be suicidal. It's the only way I could describe it if Trump did it. So I think it's a reflection of their frustration. They thought really that they could. Biden was easy on the bombing. Man, we're going to go whole hog, and they don't realize that every time they drop a bomb or fire a missile from the U.S. side, they're reducing their own inventory of those weapons. It's not like even though the defense industry's been growing, they don't have a great industrial capability to just crank these things out at a rate that exceeds the rate at which they're being used. And then, the Houthis can just sit and they launch one missile after another, and it forces the United States to start using up its inventory. So it's becoming costly. And again, what are they accomplishing? They're not stopping the Houthis from firing. And the other day when they launched that bombing strike that killed that tribal group, they come out and they gather in a square, and the U.S. dropped the bomb right in the midst of them. It'd be one thing if they were standing around a missile launcher. They weren't. There was no visible offensive weapon that could be used to launch against a ship or Israel in that picture. We murdered a bunch of civilians, it looks like. The United States did. So it's just this policy is in the process of crashing and burning.
The tragedy, Larry, is that it seems that Donald Trump genuinely believed that these people were preparing to attack the United States.
Yeah, I know. Just absurd.
Because how come he can come with this? Because he shared the video on his social media on X, and do you think that he didn't know about it? He was aware of what has happened. He has received the intelligence who these people were, or he was just not aware of that.
I've given up trying to account for some of the things which Trump does, which, from an outside observer appear to be utterly stupid, thoughtless, lacking in critical thinking. Because Trump's not an ignorant man. And he's not a stupid person. He does have intelligence, but it's mind-numbing that he didn't ask some critical questions. The first one is, okay, explain to me how these people standing around in this basically a square are going to attack ships offshore a couple of 100 miles. How does that work? Explain that to me. Apparently, he didn't ask that question. Someone ginned up that target box. One of the problems I'm sure they're running into now in Central Command, where this is all being run, is coming up with a list of viable targets. Because if the Houthis had fixed bases, let's say the Ahmed forces base where they launch missiles from, the United States could destroy that. That's very easy to destroy. You can just bomb that into oblivion. But when you're moving missiles in and out of caves, underground structures, they're in the mountains, come out, you shoot, and then they scoot away. In other words, skedaddle. They get out of the area. By the time the intelligence collection on the U.S. side identifies that spot, passes the recommendation, okay, we've got a spot, let's hit it, and then they get the force in place that can launch the missile, whether it's an airstrike or a ballistic missile or a cruise missile. By the time they get around to actually hitting the fire button, the missile's gone. The launcher's gone. So, they're just blowing up dirt. I don't know what the Yemenis are using in terms of cell phones. If they are using like an Apple, let's call it any U.S. made, Western backed phone, they're likely to be tracked, and that's one way the United States can try to locate people and collect some intelligence. I would suspect that the Yemenis are trying to use Chinese Huawei, because the Huawei phones will be far more difficult to use in the way that the U.S. phones are.
Can we say that the United States is short of targets in Yemen because of the intelligence, the poor intelligence they're receiving? That's why they're doing this.
Yeah, they don't. I think people have never worked in the intelligence world. They always assume that the intelligence side of the house knows a lot more than they're letting on. And having, been exposed to it over, 30 years now. Yeah. I take that back, 40 years. Started in 1985 with me. You discover that there are real limitations, particularly when you're relying upon satellites, which can collect images as well as intercept communications, and other overhead ISR platforms that you can see. Sometimes you see activity. You don't actually see what people are doing. You can see what you think they're doing, but it doesn't really tell you what they're thinking, what they're planning. That's why you need human intelligence. And maybe sometimes one way to get that is you can actually intercept phone conversations, provided you know who's talking to whom. But really to know what the Houthis are planning, where they're going to shoot from, you'd want to get somebody planted inside the Houthi clan who is involved with military operations, who could relay, okay, they're planning to launch a missile from these coordinates at this time on this date. That's the only way really to penetrate that. And the U.S. doesn't have good intelligence on that front. In fact, I don't remember, it's probably been a quarter of a century since we've had any kind of active CIA attempts to recruit assets inside Yemen. Go back to the bombing of the USS Cole in 2000. Then with 9/11, I don't think, but I could be mistaken, that we've had much of a CIA presence there. And you got to have people on the ground in order to go out and recruit, make friends.
The intelligence they're receiving mostly is from the Saudi Arabia, or they have somehow other sources in Yemen?
Oh, you mean the Houthis? You mean
The
I think it.
United States, the intelligence they're receiving is from
Uh,
Saudi Arabia and other Arab states, or
I'm not sure the Saudis are. You know, that might be the U.S. may be relying upon, or in part, Saudi liaison, but I'm not sure the Saudis themselves are very good at getting human assets in there. Israel, I'm sure, has tried. Um, so I would say it's probably from an intelligence standpoint looks like a black hole.
there are many people who voted for Donald Trump in the United States were just watching the way that Donald Trump was talking about the endless wars of the United States in the Middle East.
Right.
And here is a part of what he said.
No problems over a telephone. Instead, they start dropping bombs. I see recently they're dropping bombs all over Yemen. You don't have to do.
Yeah, you don't have to do. And here
Now
Donald Trump,
now he's doing it. Yeah.
he's doing it, and right now. And if do you think that Netanyahu, many people who are trying to understand it, they're saying Netanyahu is the president of the United States. How much of what they're talking about has anything to do with the reality? And the other point that Scott Ritter is, I talk with him, that he believes that Netanyahu has no leverage on Donald Trump. If that's the case, how is that possible to behave this way?
That Scott said that Netanyahu has no leverage over Trump.
No leverage on Donald Trump.
Well, while it is true that Israel is financially dependent upon the United States, and that U.S. military aid plays a critical role in the capabilities of the Israeli Defense Forces, I don't think you can dismiss the power of the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobbyists in Washington. You know, we were talking earlier about Ryan Dawson and the work he's done on the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy. If you go back and look at the policy, the last president in the United States who spoke out and advocated for the return of the Palestinians to their land was John F. Kennedy. And it was Kennedy who also was insisting that proper investigation be done of Israel to try to prevent it from proliferating and building a nuclear device. And let's call it an atomic bomb. And, coupled with that, when LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, took over after Kennedy's murder, he completely reversed all of Kennedy's policies. And so since the days of Lyndon Baines Johnson, every single president has essentially been, let's call it, a captive of that Jewish lobby. Or maybe it's more appropriate to call it the Israeli lobby. But the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee was its predecessor organization was being required by Robert F. Kennedy as Attorney General to register as a foreign agent. And they got around that by saying, "Oh, we've taken that organization down. We got a new organization, which was APAC." And John F. Kennedy was killed before that requirement went into effect. And when Lyndon Baines Johnson came in, APAC was no longer required to register. So, I mean, those are just the facts. And then, we've had Congressman Thomas Massey admit, he says, look, almost every member of Congress has got a minder who's tied to APAC. From the standpoint of the government. So I'm not sure that Trump has the potential, yes, that he could tell Bibi Netanyahu what to do. But right now, it looks like Bibi Netanyahu's telling Trump what to do. We'll see what pans out with respect to Iran. Iran's the real sort of unknown here, as far as when I say unknown, whether or not Trump is actually going to follow through on his threats to attack. We'll see.
Do they really, in Israel, do they really believe that attacking on Iran would benefit them, Larry?
Yes, oh, absolutely. It's part of it's this naive foolishness that you think, hey, all we got to do is launch this attack, kill this person, and all of our problems will be over. Well, that's the mistake Trump made in Yemen. Oh yeah, we just got to hit them hard. Biden didn't hit them hard enough. We're going to hit them harder. Well, I would argue actually that right now, having killed that tribal group, they have now earned. The United States now has a new enemy that's going to be trying to hurt us for years to come. And this is, if nothing else, this has made the Houthis in particular more committed to fighting us and beating us. So, I don't think you can ever underestimate the power of revenge. And, Israel thinks it can just magically fly in and, drop a few bombs and take out the nuclear industry, and Iran will say, oh, no, oh, you're right, we were bad. We should have done. Not going to happen. It gets out of control, and out of control quick.
You look at Donald Trump, Larry, as an American. You see the way that he's just imposing tariffs on other countries, and the way that he tries to spend even more than the Biden administration in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
How you put these two pictures together, and how does it make sense for you? How is that going to benefit the United States in a long run if we assume that he has some sort of strategy?
Yeah, maybe he does have a strategy. We talked about this a little bit last week when Scott and I were with you, that Trump's true goal with respect to Iran is to get rid of the existing leadership in Iran, get in a pro-U.S. government so that government will not cooperate with Russia in building a north-south corridor, transport corridor. This is, Iran is seen more as a pawn in a broader game to try to isolate and destroy Russia, because Iran itself is not seen as this great threat down the road. We like to talk about it as it is, but it's not really. I guess Trump's use of the tariffs, it doesn't make sense in terms of a trade policy, because the reports now are like 60 different countries are contacting the United States saying, "Oh, don't hit us. Let's negotiate." Boy, that's going to be a lot of negotiation with 60 different countries. If the tariff, I'll call it the tariff gambit, may be a ploy by Trump to actually rebalance the U.S. Debt and to try to reduce the debt. The United States has a serious problem with both short-term debt as well as the overall deficit. We owe something like $36 trillion. The tariffs it gets pretty complicated, but the tariffs provide an excuse. It is leading to a collapse in stock markets around the world. It is leading people who are desperate now to get in a safe investment that's not going to lose the value. So they're flocking to buy U.S. treasuries. And so as the demand for those treasuries go up, the United States actually can say, okay, yeah, you're gonna pay more, but you're going to get less interest off of it. And so as the interest that the United States has to pay on those treasury bills goes down, that does help take the pressure off of the debt. So maybe Trump's playing that kind of strategy. But with respect to Iran, when they claim it's about nuclear weapons, it's not. You know, apart from Iran itself saying that, hey, we've, you know, the Ayatollah Khamenei's fatwa prohibiting it. Apart from the fact that the U.S. intelligence community says they are not doing it, when Iran signed the security cooperation agreement with Russia on January 17th, both sides committed to non-proliferation. There's no way that Russia is going to sign a non-proliferation deal with Iran if Iran is building a nuclear warhead. I mean, Russia's not going to put up with that for a minute. So that's sort of another guarantee that, in fact, Iran is not working on a nuclear weapon, in my view.
Laurie, here is the leader of Yisrael Beitenu party, and he's a member of Knesset as well. And he tweeted that a year and a half has passed since the war started, and the rockets are still being fired. There are still 59 prisoners in Gaza, and the October 7th government is telling us the stories of complete victory, that the government in Israel just is picturing the way that what's happening between Israel and Gaza and between Israel and Yemen and Lebanon is a total victory for Israel. He's just questioning that.
Yeah.
What's happening? Is that different from what we're witnessing? And I was wondering how the Trump administration is helping Netanyahu the way that the Biden administration was not capable of.
Well, actually, Biden administration was helping Netanyahu enormously. But remember, the number one recipient of APAC funds over, say, the last 25, 30 years had been Joe Biden. Joe Biden's gotten far more money. I mean, you talk about being bought and paid for. The Israelis have bought and paid for him. Look, Israel's got itself a problem with Gaza and the West Bank and Lebanon and now Syria, and then with the attacks from the Houthis. In the past, whether we're talking the Yom Kippur War, the 7-Day War, Israel they haven't actually had to fight and wage a war that's lasted 6 months, much less 16 months, 17 months. So they're now they're running into the realities of attrition. They are a reserve force. They don't have this standing army of guys that sign up and I'm gonna make this a career. We're gonna stay here for 20 years, or just okay. I'm gonna come in for 4 years. They're largely reservists. So that means whatever job they have during the day, they've got to even perhaps leave that job and go do the military thing for a period. And they're running into increasing numbers of them are saying, nah, we're not going back. No. The war in Gaza, the genocide against the Palestinian people, is exposing the limitations of Israeli military power. They can't kill their way to victory. Or if they in theory, they could exterminate every single Palestinian. or get to the point where the Palestinians themselves would flee just because of the murder and the mayhem. But then Israel's ability to walk on the world stage is going to be significantly constrained. They've done so much diplomatic damage to themselves in this. I think if you go back 3 years ago, most people would, if you interviewed most people around the world, they'd take a position like, oh, the Israelis and Muslims, they just need to get along, but they didn't blame Israel necessarily. Man, over the last 16 months, the mask is off. They are murderous thugs. There's no other way to look at it. And they just admitted, they're finally forced to confess, because video evidence came out that they murdered those 15 aid workers and tried to cover it up, tried to bury it. So it's just, with that hanging over them, Israel's ability to actually be secure is right now almost entirely dependent upon having the United States back it up. Because if they don't have a security guarantee from the United States, who would provide it? Nobody.
I don't know if you saw the Syrian journalist talking about that. It seems that Al-Jolani has agreed on receiving Gazans, just displacing Gazans to Syria, in terms of I don't know, making a deal with the United States and Israel. Is that possible, in your opinion, to
No.
remove Gazans? And
not willingly. I mean, the Gazans are not stupid, and going into Syria that's under the control of radical Sunnis, I don't, because my understanding is most of the Muslims on the Palestinian side, they're not adherents of, they're not Muslim Brotherhood folks. There may be a few, but that would be, I think, just too much of a stretch. But again, Gaza's their land. They don't want to leave their land, their home. They've been there for generations, or their ancestors, before them. So again, I think that's just one more aspect of U.S. desperation. Because if we just get the Palestinians out of it, then everything will be okay. That Israel will be satisfied. Remember the crazies, the Smotrich, the Ben Gavirs, they want from Egypt, they want to take parts of Egypt all the way to Iraq. That's the land God gave them, so they say. And that's what they want, which means the hell with the Jordanians, the hell with what's left in Syria, in that part of the world, the hell with Iraqi tribe, And I'm sorry, the folks in those countries aren't going to go along with that.
Do we know what was the case of Smotrich? Ben Gvir, he got out of the government, he came back, and Smotrich right now is out of the government. Is that part of the plan on the part of Netanyahu, or?
I have not followed the internal Israeli politics on that, so I couldn't say. I mean, what we do know from past comments is both Smotrich and Ben Gvir are convicted terrorists. They've been convicted. So there are elements within Israeli society that have viewed them as bona fide terrorists that need to be in jail. And they've been, completely enabled by Netanyahu. But he uses people at his convenience.
Larry, we had a member of the Supreme National Security Council in Iran. He had a talk with the media, when one of the media in Iran. He mentioned that everyone in the council agreed to carry out Operation True Promise 3. but Pezeshkian was the only person who opposed it.
Mhm.
When you look at the way it seems that the leader was somehow letting Pezeshkian to find his way out, to find his way to deal with the issue of the United States, with the issue that they're having with the United States. Do you think that's possible from what we're witnessing right now? Something happened because this government, in my opinion, is a new opportunity. As the Trump administration was, we were hoping that he's going to change the attitude of the United States. If we, I would say, in my lifetime, I haven't seen a government this way to do everything in order to facilitate negotiating with the United States. And how do you see on the part of the United States and the situation with the Iranian? Is that possible, or they're not? There is nothing to be considered on the part of the United States. They don't know what's going on in Iran.
Well, they don't know, or they don't. The United States refuses to take an objective look at Iran. We routinely characterize it as the number one sponsor of terrorism in the world, this great terrorist threat. You can't point to a single attack by any Iranian-backed group or a sponsored individual in the United States. Heavens, I don't think you can point one since the emergence of the Iranian Revolution in '79. So let's say 46 years. I keep making this point, but I'll hammer it again. The State Department's annual report on terrorism, it goes under the title now, Country Reports on Terrorism, has listed over, when you go back, you look at each year for the last 25 years, that the groups that are carrying out actual terrorist attacks, that are attacking U.S. targets, civilian targets. That's what we're talking about, terrorism, not military operations, are Sunni-backed by the Gulf Arabs, not by Iran. Now, some will say, oh, but Iran was sponsoring Shia groups that were attacking U.S. soldiers in Iraq. Yeah, it's called war. We illegally invaded Iraq. And just as we're providing military assistance to Israel because they were attacked on October 7th. That's all Iran was doing with respect to Iraq, the Shia in Iraq. I thought, as did Professor Morandi, that after the October 27th hit by Israel, that Iran was going to really punch back hard then. But I think as we look back, the negotiations that were underway with Russia at the time for that security agreement, I think the Russians made it pretty clear to Pezeshkian and his foreign minister that, the last thing you want to do is start a war with the United States right now. Let's get this relationship solid between us so that we can help protect you. Because I think the Russians understand that the United States wants to use Iran as a lever against Russia. And so Russia's got a vested interest in helping protect Iran. Plus, you had since 2019, an annual naval military exercise between China, Russia, and Iran. All three cooperating in that. So this is those countries just don't go out and do exercises with everybody. It's not, they're not doing Nigeria and Egypt and Libya. No. The Russians are doing it and the Chinese are doing it for a specific reason because of the strategic importance of Iran. So I think that those discussions, because when you look at the agreement that was signed on January 17th, finally, it really commits Russia to the military defense of Iran if Iran is unjustly attacked under Article 51. And people say, "Oh, that's you're going too far, Johnson." No, that's what it says. It says it in a very diplomatic way. Provides for military support, equipment, personnel. It provides for intelligence support, information about threats coming at it, and diplomatic support. And all of this is part of the package for developing that north-south transport corridor. If you step back and look at it from Russia's standpoint, apart from the Pacific Ocean, they don't have unfettered access to any of the oceans. To get into the Atlantic, the North Atlantic, they've got to sail through out of the Baltic Sea through the narrow straits there that could easily be shut down by Denmark, Norway, Sweden. And then if they go down to the Black Sea, they got to go through the Dardanelles to get out to the Mediterranean. Again, that's a narrow passage. So having that access down into the Arabian Sea, off to the Indian Ocean, huge. So Russia's thinking about this strategically as a chess player. And I guess, the irony too there is chess was developed in Iran originally, not Russia. So I think Pezeshkian came along, and the IRGC commanders, I think, have finally, understood the wisdom of not attacking Israel right now. If Israel launches another attack, then I think you're going to be looking at immediate retaliation from Iran, whether it's the United States or Israel. Iran is not going to wait. So they'll be on a hair, and they'll be justified. If they're attacked again, this will be the second time they've been attacked. They didn't start the cycle of murder here. Israel did.
Do you see that the way that Donald Trump is dealing with Russia in Ukraine is changing or somehow influencing the Russian strategy in a long run?
I think the Russians are being very cautious. They're hearing what Trump's saying, but they're looking to say, let's watch what the actions are. You say you want peace? Okay, then why the hell are you still supplying intelligence to Ukraine that's being used to attack us? You say you want peace? Why are you continuing to allow the flow of arms, weapons to Ukraine? And then they listen to the likes of Mike Waltz and Keith Kellogg, and Marco Rubio. Oh, yeah, Russia's going to have to make concessions. If I was in the Russian negotiating team, I said, the hell we do. We don't have to make one damn concession. The concession we're going to make is we'll allow you to surrender to Ukraine. We'll allow you to surrender. But Russia is, Putin has made it very clear what he wants, that those, the two new oblasts that were formerly Ukrainian oblasts that were brought into the Russian Federation in September of 2022, Zaporizhia and Kherson, along with Donetsk and Luhansk, have to be completely vacated of Ukrainian troops, and the fighting has to stop there. Then Russia will talk about a peace deal, but they're not looking for ceasefire of any sort. They've been burned too many times. I heard that directly from Foreign Minister Lavrov during my time in Moscow a few weeks ago. So they're not going to get bamboozled again by Western promises of a ceasefire that will never hold. There's going to be a surrender on the part of Ukraine, one way or the other. And Russia's not going to accept anything less. And that's where Trump and team don't seem to comprehend that. So we'll see. Now word's out today that Trump is, if Ukraine doesn't sign that rare earth mineral deal, that we'll cut them off completely. Yeah, we'll see. Trump he's all over the board. He's got he's set too many houses on fire right now. He's got to figure out. He's only got one fire truck and he's got 4 houses burning. Which house do you go put out first?
You believe that the way that Donald Trump is just playing around with the issue of Ukraine is related to the deal between the United States and Ukraine? Because so far, as we know, Ukraine doesn't have that much to offer.
Right. Well, yeah. The notion that they're going to offer this rare earths deal, of course, not even clear that they have rare earths. Here's another irony. The United States actually has a lot of these rare earths, and they're about 30, 40 miles from where I am sitting right now. There's a company called Mosaic Mining, and when they dig out of the sandy soil, which is part of Florida, and they leave called the tailings, what's left over of the mining operation, actually in those mining, in that mound of stuff, you got rare earths. They just have to be extracted. Well, here the Ukrainians were offering the United States, let's say, the old expression, a pig and a poke, or something that didn't really exist. And the actual mineral wealth, a lot of it that's in Ukraine is now controlled by Russia in Donetsk, Luhansk, and you go up into Kharkiv, Sumy. I think Russia's going to wind up taking in a much larger chunk of Ukraine, and the negotiating effort by the United States has failed to end the war in Ukraine. We'll see if it reestablishes normal diplomatic relations. That's what the Russians want. Trump may want that, but they're also thinking that they can bully, his art of the deal in New York, where you make even making threats in order to coerce people to come sit down and reach a deal. That's not going to work with Russia. Russia has, the history. They have not, what's happened to them over the last 120 years is still very vivid in memory. It's not just ancient history. So they're not going to surrender their security.
Larry, did you watch the interview that the U.S. Treasury Secretary had with Tucker Carlson?
Yes.
When he mentioned Russia, do you think that his comments on Russia were realistic?
No. Again, it's reflective of he's looking at this economically without understanding the culture and the history. He's looking at it strictly from a financial standpoint, and even then, I don't think he fully grasps that how strong Russia is financially. Some stories have emerged this week that Russia's economic growth is slowing down. That proves they're weak. The reason they're slowing it down is they were fighting inflation, and the steps they've taken to control inflation are reducing the economic growth, but that was a deliberate policy. They at least seem to manage their economy, unlike the United States.
Here is a part of what he said on the show.
There was the famous meeting where President Trump told the Europeans, you're insane for building Nord Stream 2. What are you doing? You already get most of your energy from Russia, and you're going to double down on it? And they did. And look what happened. So
We blew it up.
somebody did. Somebody did.
Probably Putin.
Can you imagine this happening under the Biden?
Well, yeah, Biden ordered its destruction, or somebody in Biden's team did, and it was carried out by an intelligent, my old organization had the lead on it. But the United States has played. It didn't just start under Biden. Remember, under Trump as well. He was making threats against Nord Stream back in his first administration. And it was all about, we want that business for ourselves. We'd prefer that the Europeans be dependent on us as opposed to the Russians. Except the Russians' gas was much cheaper because it didn't have as far to travel. They could move it in a pipeline as opposed to loading it up on a ship that then has to sail across the ocean, then has to be unloaded, and just all the shipping and handling on the part of U.S. Liquid natural gas made it more expensive. So again, I don't think the United States has a good strategic understanding of Russia. We feel that they're too big, they're a threat, they've got all these natural resources we want, and we got to figure out a way to try to destroy them. And for many years, the Russians didn't think we were that crazy. I think they now realize, yeah, actually the Americans, they're that damn crazy. Not to be trusted.
Larry, it seems that Emmanuel Macron gonna be the representative of Europe in any sort of ceasefire talks with Russia. And do you find this guy, he was so much unreliable, and you look at his behavior, and he's just changing every time. He's shifting to one point to the other point. How can they believe that this guy can represent them?
They can believe that, but the Russians don't accept him as he's not credible anymore for Russia. Particularly when he released, the last 2 or 3 months, he released a phone conversation he had with Vladimir Putin back in 2022, and along with the video. And in the video, he had members of the French press sitting there listening to what was supposed to be a private conversation. Putin understands that and is not happy. So, yeah, he's not gonna be credible. Hey, by the way, I need to let you know, I've got another appointment here in about 10 minutes. We can go another 5 minutes if you want.
Just to wrap it up, Larry, it would be the Keir Starmer is just seeing the link between globalization and the tariffs. He says that he admits that globalization has failed as tariff war rages. What's the connection between the two that he's talking about?
Well, it goes back to classical, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. And I remember when I took my first economics class, good God, 50 years ago, that we're taught basically that all people, every country's got certain advantages that other countries don't. And so if each country would use its own advantage, and then they can trade and exchange, and you get this wonderful world of equilibrium where each side is, they produce what they can produce, and they trade. They got excess, they trade it to someone else who needs what they produce, and it's all wonderful. It promotes this sort of global, this concept that, if everybody in the globe would just work together, we'd all be better off. But, there was some hidden economic skullduggery and all of that. And the reality is not all countries are created equal. And Then we saw in the colonial era how the Europeans in particular, and later the United States, ended up exploiting. There were some countries in Africa that were resource rich, but we took control of their politics and basically raped them, which is what we want to do with Russia. So now the tariffs, in theory, are supposed to balance out the trade. The Donald Trump complains that we got all these German cars driving around the United States and they're not driving Chevys. Well, I rented a Chevrolet when I was in Washington, D.C. on my last trip. That's what they gave me. What a piece of crap that is. And I mean, the engineering on it's terrible. Like you go to try to plug in your phone to charge it. Everybody, that's one of the common things in cars now. They had it down on it. You had to like contort yourself. You had to be like a yoga master to get underneath there to plug it in. And it's like, that's one of the reasons they don't buy American cars, because we got crappy engineers. So maybe I should end on that rant.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry.
All right, my friend.
See you on Friday.
Yes, sir. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.